I'm a big believer in the things that someone who's at 7 or 8 figures is doing. It's going to be totally different than the things that you need to do if you're at 6 figures. You have to earn the right to be successful. It is not a given. You're 42% more likely to achieve your goals when literally 42%. The FBI, they did a study. So there's a million ways to make $1 million. You just have to pick one and stick with it. But everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah, everyone talks about my religion.
Last time I saw you, we were in Miami actually, a couple months ago. And you were at the 7-figure award. Yeah. Cool, man. So I wanted to ask you this, man. Like, when did you? First of all, how old are you?
So I just turned 22, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can't use that crazy flex of 18 and running these companies.
Dude, I went through that as well. I turned 24 this year, and I'm like, oh damn, now I'm like a regular adult. Like everything we do, we gotta go like super hard for it to be a flex.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because today's obviously New Year's Eve, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be 23 years old this year or in 2024. So this year coming up, and I'm like, oh, I feel so old, and I bet everyone else watching who's probably older than I am, they're like, dude, come on. Right? But in my eyes, I'm like, I've got it. This has got to be a crazy year for massive, massive growth because I can't be in the same position I was this year, next year, right? Yeah. I have to grow. I have to level up because if I feel like if I don't, I'm going to lose all this momentum that I've been building, and we don't want that.
No, 100%. So let's talk about that, man. What's in the vision board? What's in the plans for 2024 for Garrett Curry?
That's a great question, man. 2023 was a great year. It's a lot of learning. I mean, we went through a lot with the agency. Obviously, we have our marketing agency. We do a few $1 million a year, and one of the things that we tried to do this year was exit, and a lot of people don't know that. We actually tried to get out of the space, and what we realized is it wasn't time for us yet. It wasn't time for us to get out, and that wasn't in God's plans. And I think one of our biggest focuses for this year, and I say ours because I'm thinking of Matt and myself, because we try to move together. We try to do the same thing, go the same route. We're in a lot of alignment. Sometimes that doesn't always work out, but we try because it's a great partnership. And one of the biggest things that I realized last year is I started, as I was scaling businesses, as I was making all this money, I forgot how I got there. And for me, God and religion is a big part of my life. And I realized that in 2023, I feel like I neglected that. And I thought that I did everything and got to where I'm at by myself, and I forgot about that. And a lot of humbling experiences this year, and it brought me back to where I needed to be. So for 2024, one of my biggest, goals, as you could say, is really connecting again with God and my religion, right? On top of that, content is huge, right? That's why we're doing this podcast right now, because, and I think Alex Hormozi says this all the time, and when Matt and I were fortunate enough to have our call with him, he made us realize that attention it's like oil. Yeah, it's the modern day oil, and it's the scarcest resource that we have. And there's a lot of benefits that come with this, and I think getting not only my message out there, but what's really possible with this digital space for someone who may have nothing right now. In literally 6 months' time, they can build something insane for themselves. So content is number 2, right? And number 3 for me is actually going to be buying other businesses, right? I've been in Cody Sanchez's mastermind for a period of time. We bought a State AI, our current marketing agency, and I haven't done a lot of acquisitions since then, and that was 2 years ago. So I want to get into some more acquisitions, more micro PE, and really looking for simple cash flowing businesses.
Interesting.
And then I'm thinking about also doing some coaching this year. So 2024 is a big year and got a lot of stuff planned.
That's what's up, man. So, just to elaborate on a couple of things that you mentioned there. So, one of the concepts that I've been wrestling a lot with, and I would love your thoughts on, is, we've been taught by Alex Ramosi and all these other guys that, like, single focus, right? Like, focus on one thing, grow that, and then eventually, you could diversify at X, Y, Z, right? But looking at you guys' journey, yours and Matt, this year, 2023, you guys did a lot of diversification from the outside, at least from what I was able to see, right? You guys were doing a state AI. I see Matt going super hard on YouTube. Then whatever he's doing with other agencies and stuff, I don't know if he's partnering with them or coaching them or whatever the case. I see you buying property. So I guess at what point or what parameters or what framework did you use to be able to step away a little bit from I'm only going to do one thing and then start exploring these other options? Because from my point of view, every time you go into another space, it's not just spending money on that thing. It's the research part, is which mentors, is understanding the space, and then actually taking action, right? So that takes a lot of time and effort and focus. So for you, what frameworks, what KPIs were you looking at before you decided to, like, hey, it's okay for me to step away from this main thing a little bit and go and learn this new fields?
That's a great question, and I'm a big believer in the man who chases two rabbits catches none, obviously. Right. But at the end of the day, what I've also realized is that the analogies and those cool metaphors that applied to you when you were going from 0 to 6 figures may not apply when you're going, and they may also apply when you're going from 0 to or 6 to 7 figures, right? But they may not apply when you're going from 7 to 8 figures. And by looking, there's a lot of different schools of thoughts, right? Hermosi may say, focus, 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 and correct. I think you should focus as you're scaling to 7 figures, as you're scaling to 6 figures. But if you look at even his businesses, when he was scaling Gym Launch, he also had Allen. He also had his supplement company. And he had a lot of other horizontal things that complemented his main business. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking at doing, right? That's why Matt is posting on YouTube and coaching, right? Because they all complement what we're currently doing. I was also talking to Eddie the other day, Eddie Malouf, right? And for those people that don't know him, runs like
Crazy
a...
guy.
Yeah, he's doing like $2 million a month, I think, right now, with Bad Marketing, and which is his agency. And he just bought he just bought an entire chicken franchise. He didn't just buy one franchise; he bought the entire franchise. Nice. And he owns a marketing agency. He does e-com. He's doing all these other things. And there was a reason why he bought that. But I think as you're looking to scale horizontally is a great approach, especially for an entrepreneur like me who can't stay focused on one thing. It's very, very difficult. And to be honest with you, I'm playing around with it. So it could completely fall on my face. But I think with the help of all my mentors and seeing people like Cody Sanchez, Eddie, Joel Kaplan, they all have their hands in these other things. Once they hit that 7-figure mark, that multi-7-figure mark, they started branching out. And they started looking for things with bigger enterprise value. And I think that's really our biggest focus, because with the agency, I mean, unless you're going to build a VaynerMedia type of agency, which I'm not, I'm going to keep the local lead gen game. Yeah. I don't really have much intention on taking that agency to multi-8 figures because the complexity that is required to do that, it's not something that's going to, that I want. People don't build businesses to dictate what their lifestyle is going to be. People build a lifestyle, and then the business is centered on helping and developing that lifestyle to where they want it to go. And I think when you have a team where your leadership, your managers are giving better answers or the same answers to you as what to do in a specific situation or make a decision, that's when you can kind of back off a little bit and let your team do everything. Because I don't want to get a dog and tell it how to bark too. I don't want to hire a dog, tell it how to bark.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing this correctly, there are 2 things that allow you to step away from the main thing and start, branching out to other things. And correct me if I'm wrong. 1, hit that multi-7-figure mark. And I'm guessing this is over years or something like that. But just make sure that you could make a lot of money in that one chosen field. And once you have that, having a team that allows you to step away from the thinking part of it. If the team can think for you, essentially, or think just as close as you would, then you feel like those were the 2 things that allow you to, like, hey, like, okay, let's start making moves outside of this specific space. Did I get that right?
100%.
Cool. That's good. That's good. And I'm sure that was super helpful for me. For people watching this, that might be helpful as well, because I know I'm not the only one wrestling with the thought of, should I do something else? Especially when you start making some money, more opportunities come.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, hey, let's do this. Let's partner up here. And it's like, shit. It sounds cool and all, but just the thought of the time that it's going to require, just on the thinking aspect of it, I'm like, nah, like I can't do it. But then I see people like you doing other stuff, and I'm like,
And you have to ask yourself, what do those people have? And it's OPT. It's leveraging OPT. Everyone talks about OPM, other people's money. No one talks about OPT, which is other people's time, right? Having the right managers. For example, I just purchased another property. We're flipping it. I have the little mini real estate portfolio, nothing compared to Grant Cardone, but I have property managers or partners that manage those properties, and I don't touch any of that. The flip I'm doing in Pennsylvania right now, I have a partner who's taking care of the entire flip. I'm just throwing the money in. So I think, as you mentioned, right, once you get to that certain point, you can start leveraging these other things that you have access to, right, which is either people, which are connections, or capital, which you would have if you get to that 7-figure mark, and also just a management team, which kind of goes back to people, right?
Interesting. No, that's pretty cool. I guess for follow-up question on that, you were talking about leveraging other people's time. How do you find those people? The people that are, let's say, the flip in Pennsylvania. You're in New Jersey. Your businesses are online. How do you find a partner in Pennsylvania that can do a flip?
That's a great question. People always say the best investment you can make is an investment into yourself. Now, the knowledge is really powerful when you make those investments into yourself. But something that's even more powerful, and something that's not talked about as much in our space specifically, are the connections. The marketing agency game is a relationship-based business. It genuinely is. The amount of connections and people that I've met since just joining one mastermind, Joel's mastermind, it's been insane, right? The access that I've been able to get, the network. It truly is the old saying of your network is your net worth. It's cliche, but the cliche things normally are the true things.
So you joined a mastermind that had to do with real estate and stuff like that to start making those connections in that space, or?
It's funny. No, I joined Joel's group.
Okay.
Brandon Spears, good friend of mine, right? We actually just bought another property together, and him and I were talking. He knows this person from another mastermind he joined called Apex. So he knew the person in Pennsylvania. He started doing flips with that person. He was just throwing money, and that person was managing the flips. And because I know Brandon and because I saw what he was doing, he put me in contact with his friend.
Nice.
All goes back to network.
That's pretty cool. And it's interesting how it all stemmed from the digital marketing space, right? It's like you're doing all these different things, but it all started here, and it's still giving you connections and opportunities. So I guess you're 22, right? So when did you start this whole entrepreneurial journey, I guess online entrepreneurial journey?
So I was 16 when I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Absolutely changed my life. After that, I bought a vending machine and an ATM because I wanted to make passive income. Little did I know those businesses were only going to make me about $200 to $300 a month profit.
Yeah.
So, I had a long way to go to financial freedom in retirement, right? So from there, I found this course online when I was around 17. I had just turned 17, invested in the course, and it was Billy Wilson's course. And that course taught me how to get to that 6-figure run rate.
Nice. I had a similar journey. I started in dropshipping. Back in 2017, I believe. I was around 17 at the time, I believe, and use the skills there, because obviously dropshipping is mainly media buying, right? It's like finding products and then creating really good ads and targeting and stuff. And back in the days, you could really get specific with Facebook ads and stuff. So I started there, made some money there. I think my best month was like $30K, $7,000 profit, like 20% profit margins kind of thing, and then lost it all the following month. One of my suppliers. So I was scaling this product. It was a blanket. It was right around this time, actually. It was for Christmas. I was scaling this product. It was a blanket. I was buying it. The largest variant was $90 is what it would cost me. And I was selling it for $190, $185 around there. In December of 2017, I believe, or 2018, I can't remember, I did $30,000 in sales, and it was around 10 grand worth of inventory that I had purchased from this supplier. And then around the 30th or 31st, literally around now, I started getting a whole bunch of emails about the tracking code. And I'm like, what's going on with the tracking codes? And they were all saying the same thing, that the order was stuck in Fresno, California. And I'm like, fudge, these are fake tracking codes. So now I got 300 people that order this blanket. It was a lot of money. Some people would buy 2 for Christmas or New Year's gifts, and their stuff was now going to arrive. So now I'm getting hit with chargebacks, refunds, all this stuff. So obviously I had to shut down the ads. I had like a 15x ROAS on those because the margin was so good, and the video was great. And I had to shut everything down to deal with this thing because I didn't have a supplier for it. Now I'm getting people hitting it on the Facebook page and posting and doing all this other stuff. Shut down the store, and then I had to deal with Wells Fargo's to dispute 300 transactions that I purchased from this guy. So it took me like 3 months, and I think I got out of the 10 grand probably like $6,000 back, and that was it. So my parents didn't know about this, right? Like I was 17, 18, around that age.
What made you want to get into it?
I was a senior in high school, and I remember being in AP history class, and a friend of mine that at the time
You were one of the smart kids.
Yeah. So I just a quick background, probably, like just a quick backstep. I wasn't born in the States. Right? I was in the Dominican Republic, right? And so my parents were professionals there. Both had really good jobs, but they knew that for us, my siblings and myself, to have a future in DR, like having a education from the United States, like that would be really good. So they decided to move the family out here. And so the path was clear. It was like, look, go to school, get the best grades, go to college, get a job, you'll be fine. And so that's what I was doing in high school. 4.0 GPA, AP history, honors classes, all that stuff. But I remember being in AP history class, and I saw my friends, one of my friends, looking at like charts and money on his phone. I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing? And he was also like a smarty pants. So I'm like, bro, like, why are you not paying attention? He's like, oh, like I'm selling t-shirts online. I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? You're like 17, just like me. Like, what? And he showed me he was doing print on demand at the time. So I'm like, what the hell? So that like opened my eyes. Like, dude, you could be just like me, same age, selling t-shirts that you don't own. You don't have the machines and anything to make it. And I guess what do they call it? Like the bug bit me at that time. I was like, man, like I got to find a way to make money online. And so, yeah, that started my whole process. Print on demand started that. Learned Photoshop to create like t-shirts and stuff. That didn't really pan out. And then I moved over to the drop shipping space, and I did that. And that's where I started. So it's crazy. I'm still working, in online, but it started from that, from the drop shipping. And a lot of people, it's one of my thoughts with it. Like a lot of people, what would be a nice way to say it? They talk bad about that business model, but I think for me, it taught me a lot. Like I'm not saying, hey, go start dropshipping to become a millionaire, but with dropshipping, you learn a lot of skills like media buying, website design, product research, fulfilling orders, email marketing. There's a lot of skills that could come out of that. And it's a very low entry model. And so, when I see a lot of people saying like, don't start dropshipping, I'm like, dude, like let people start. And I think that's one of the biggest, things like you started back in the day, with Billy Wilson's course. I started with dropshipping, and because we both started, we are where we are now. We took action. And for a lot of people now that are like overwhelmed, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? My advice is like just start. It doesn't, at least for me, it's like it doesn't really matter. If you spend a year learning this thing and investing on this thing, it doesn't have to be that you become a millionaire with it. It's at least you're in the space. You're learning skills, and then you could use that to meet other people, or leverage your skills in a different business model. What would be your advice for someone that's 17, 18, and there's all these business opportunities, right? Amazon, drop shipping, SMMA, like, and they're thinking of which one should I pick?
So there's a million ways to make $1 million.
Right.
You just have to pick one and stick with it. And I think you have to look a little bit deeper, and it's hard. It's really hard because at that age of 16, 17, you don't really know what you want to do. You don't really know. I've met a few kids that are at that age, and they're like, yes, this is the path. But everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxing legends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to look a little bit deeper into what the end goal is. I knew for me, I needed a cash flowing business to invest in real estate because I was following the Robert Kiyosaki approach. Cash flow, profits into real estate, passive income, funds my lifestyle. That's how I viewed it. That's how I thought about building wealth. And I knew I couldn't really figure out what was going to be beyond that until I got to that point of quote unquote financial freedom. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You can't, and when you're 16, 17, 18, yeah, you have your parents and they're kind of taking care of your basic needs. But as you're getting out of that age and you're also deciding that you're not going to college, you have to realize like, all right, I need to figure out these needs for myself. I'm going to have to start building up that hierarchy in Maslow's pyramid. And I think once I started realizing that, it was quite easy for me to decide what route I was going to go. And it was quite easy because I just picked the first one. I picked the first one that made sense and that was congruent to what I was trying to achieve.
Nice.
So I think for the person out there who's listening, for the person out there who's 16, 17, who knows, even they're 25, 26, however old they may be. And they're trying to figure out what that next step is. First, get Maslow's hierarchy of needs dialed in. And the best businesses that you can create almost not instant, but really quick cash flow is social media marketing, drop shipping. And there's a few more out there. But the SMMA game is one of the best spaces to learn sales, marketing, client success, and you really just get an entire MBA by doing it.
Yeah.
So I think for the person out there listening, pick one and just stick with it and go all in for 1 year. If you can give it 1 year, you invest in yourself. You buy a program. All these programs, all these other models, I can promise you, they work. Because I can name one person in every single one of those industries that's making a ton of money. Learn from the best person you can. Just go all in. It could be SMA. It could be something totally different. Doesn't matter. Pick one, stick with it.
I agree, man. And it's an interesting mindset that a lot of people in the multi-six-figure space have and people that want to get to that space don't have. It's a very clear contrast. We believe in mentors. We believe in mentors. We believe in buying courses. We believe in buying access to people that have achieved, what we want to achieve. And it's just so clear to me. And now looking back, I'm like, I don't think I was that ignorant, but there's a lot of people out there hating on, course creators or whatever. It's like, you guys are scammers, this and that. I'm like, dude, look at the people that you want to be. They all have mentors. They all believe in mentors. I guess for you, do you ever had that pushback on should I buy a course? Am I going to get scammed? Or do you always understood that hey, if I want to get to that space, I need to?
I think there's a beautiful thing in being naive and young and young and dumb.
Yeah.
I think it's a great time to, number one, get hurt and learn a lot of stuff from that. It's also a great time to take risk and really scale to a whole new level. And I was thinking about this. Sometimes I regret having learned so much by executing, and by having some of these bad experiences and negative experiences with certain things that I've done. Because I feel as though when you have that level of naivete, right, then you're able to just execute and do stuff and take action, take these risks without worrying about the second and third order consequences. I think you get to a point, and I'm experiencing that right now, right, running our agency. There are certain things I would have done 2 years ago that I absolutely would not do now, and such as just trying a bunch of stuff and testing it, right? I'm always thinking about what are the downsides, right? What's the second and third order consequences? And I think that kind of prevents people from growing to some extent, but it also protects you, and it protects your downside. I think it's a balance. But I think at that young age, I think it's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's at the levels you guys are at, one bad decision could really turn things, south.
Could sink the ship.
Right. But when we're starting out, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Right? You don't got much.
What's the worst that could happen?
I'm broke. I'm broke already. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I spent $1,000 on the course. It didn't pan out. So what? Like we go back and I think it's that, right? Is if when I have these conversations, I like to think about like who I was, because I know there's a lot of people that are in that situation now, right? And it's like, dude, if put things into a perspective, like you said, what's the worst thing that could happen? Because that's it. It's like at the level we're at now, it makes sense for us to not necessarily second guess, but really think about the second and third, order of consequences. But when you're starting out, there's really none. I mean, unless you have a family and kids and this and that. I mean, it'll make things harder, but still, it's not like life or death. People, you don't have 30 people on payroll, a $50,000 payroll every month or whatever. Like, you don't have a lot of that stuff. So it's like, just be naive to some extent. Yeah. Like you have to. You have to if you want to get started, because otherwise your brain gets the best out of you. And then you never start. And there's going to be a lot of people tomorrow, the following week, that are going to make all these resolutions, all these plans, all these big goals for 2024, new year, new me kind of thing. And then this one little mindset will prevent them, a big majority of them, not being naive enough to just start. It's crazy.
100%. Fear is just false evidence appearing real.
110%.
That's all it is.
Good one. And dude, I say this with a passion because there's a lot of people in our shoes, back into this. And I feel like there's more people now that want to start a business, that want to get out of the matrix or whatever, people want to call it, than they were back then when we started 2017, 2018. And it goes back to the same thing. It's like, dude, you got to be naive enough to just start. There is no magic pill. There is no one guru that is real. Like all of these guys, if, they've achieved something in life, they know one or two things that you don't. Period. Like stop. There's a lot of people that want to become FBI agents. Oh, is it real? Is it a real Lambo? Is it this? Is it rented? Dude, a Lambo costs $1,500 a day to rent it. So even if the guy is renting it, he has $1,500 to spend it on a car in one day. That's probably like your 2-week paycheck. Like, chillax. It's just, I don't know why so many people want to like be so anal about who they're learning from. Like, dude, if they're a couple steps ahead, just go for it. Go learn from these people.
One of the things that I've realized is that you can learn something from anyone. I've bought bad programs out there, bad coaching programs, bad courses. I've still learned something from it. Just depends on what you take from it.
110%. And I think it's also the mentality you go in when you get these programs. I remember my first like paid program was a $2,000 course from Mike Barron. I don't know if you know who he is, but back in the day, he used to run a program where he would teach people how to start an SMMA for gyms. And that's essentially where I started after dropshipping. And I didn't have $2,000 to spend on that program, but his salesperson, Gage, he told me, dude, just apply to 3 credit cards today. If you get one, use that for the program. Again, naive enough, right? If I would have done that now, I'd be like, my credit scored and, the points and blah, blah, blah. Back in the day, I didn't know shit about credit. So I'm like, sure, I'll apply it and I'll get some money. I got an Amex, $2,000 credit line. Next day, I was like, hey, I got the 2 credit. Cool. Boom. Pay for the program, $2,000. Right? And back in the day, dude, like that decision of being naive enough to just apply it and get the stuff is really why I'm where I am now to some extent, because that was my first step into the digital marketing space. From there, I learned lead gen for local businesses, learn ads, learn sales, right? Because you got to cold call these gym owners, got to make sure they show up, got to deal with objections, like all these other skills I learned because of that one decision. And now looking back, I took that decision because I was naive enough that I didn't know more. I just knew that I wanted to make money and these people were making money. So I'm like, I'll just learn from these people. And my mentality was, I got to make enough money to pay this credit card back. So I'll learn as much as possible. I'll show up to every call. I'll ask as many questions as possible. And I think that now looking back, that that mentality is definitely needed when you start a coaching program.
And I think you did something that's really good that a lot of people aren't willing to do, especially as you start having kids, you have a house and you have all these other expenses. It gets even tougher, right? But you put yourself in a corner. And I think for a lot of people, nothing's going to happen. There's never going to be a change unless the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. The pain of staying the same must be greater in order for a change to actually happen. And you just jumped in. And that's the difference.
I agree. That's going to go over a lot of people's head, that you just said. The pain of staying the same needs to be greater than the pain of change. That's going to go a lot of over people's head. But it's true, right? If we use that same, quote there to that decision, basically, I couldn't stay the same because otherwise I wouldn't have the $2K to pay Amex. So that was, like someone breathing down my neck. And that was more uncomfortable than me going and learning these lessons and making some cold calls or whatever the case might be. And so I did the cold calls. And I joined the calls and I got the results because staying the same was worse. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They might have $1,000 saved up, but they don't want to buy a $200 course.
Yeah. But you also came from, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you came from obviously immigrant parents and you were an immigrant yourself. Yeah. How do you think that had an impact on stuff? Because if you look especially, and I can't stand it, but if you look at, I mean, we're pretty much the same age. If you look at our generation, the generation a little bit before us, there's this weird energy about capitalism, about successful people, about America and American principles. You came from a country. You went through the process. You did all of that stuff to come here. It's a lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of fear. But you did all of that to come to the United States of America. How did that have an impact on you? I'm really curious.
It's interesting, man, because I think about this a lot. Even though I came from immigrant parents, I didn't necessarily have the common immigrant story where, like, my parents were broke, we don't have anything, we're like, my parents were good in the Dominican Republic. We had money back then. And so when we came to the States, I wasn't necessarily, like, super poor, but I always had this belief that my parents did so much for me that I have to find a way to pay them back. And so when I came to the States, that was my mission. So, dude, I'm going to use every resource possible to make as much money as possible because I have this inner drive that I want to give back to my parents. And so I don't necessarily know if that comes from being an immigrant or not, but I do know that in the DR, they're way less soft than over here. I think here, one of the causes of why we see a lot of people hating on capitalism and all this other stuff is because they were pampered as kids. They don't appreciate it. It was given to them. And so now they're in a privileged position and they feel like they could, judge or whatnot because you don't know what it took to get to where you are now. You don't know what it took to have nice things. You don't know what it took to have options. And so now you feel like, oh, you could hate, yeah, right, because you don't value it. Like, you don't have to work for it. You had an iPhone when you were freaking 5 years old, right? You get an iPad if you cry. It's like all these weird things, right? But I think that if there's anything that I took or that it was given to me by the fact that I was an immigrant, it was that I understood the value of things. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, but my parents worked really hard to have nice things. And so from a young age, I saw it's like, dude, if I want to have a nice car, like my dad just got a car, my dad works so much. I must. And the cool thing is this, it's like, we weren't politicians. Like, typically in my country, people that have money, either a politician or like doing drugs or something like that, right? Or they have like big businesses, right? My parents didn't have neither of those things. They didn't have big businesses. They worked. Weren't politicians and definitely weren't involved in drugs. And so I saw, I was like, okay, so the system isn't as rigged as people make it out to be. And that's a big realization, especially when I came here to the States. Because I saw people that lived here for more years than not, right? I came in 2013. There were people that had been here since like 2009 and stuff like that. So they knew the language. When I came, I didn't know the language. And then 2 years in, I'm making more money than them. I speak better English than them. And like, you know, I feel better than them in terms of like my happiness. I wasn't depressed or anything like that. And so I looked at it, I'm like, dude, like, okay, so the system isn't as rigged, because if I could come in later in the game than you and have more stuff than you, then the system isn't really against you. It's just up for grabs.
So, but what do you think separates the victims from the victors?
The victims from the victors. Great questions. And I think that I can't necessarily speak in general terms, but at least for me, because I had that inner drive that I wanted to, you know, give back to my parents and stuff like that, I pushed. And by pushing and trying and working, the results showed me, dude, the system isn't against you. It's for you if you use it correctly. And so for someone that's out there blaming the system and this and that and becoming a victim, maybe from my point of view, you don't have something worth fighting for, and so you haven't used the system to your advantage, and the system has used you. And so now that's your perspective on the system, from my point of view.
That makes a lot of sense. So if someone's in that situation right now, and they have this inner belief, like you said, that the system isn't rigged, and they want to do more, but it's not something that's really pushing them, how do you tap into that? Into that drive, into that desire? Good
question. I remember this was 2015 or 2016. And I want to ask your thoughts on this, but using negative energy to your advantage. I was always the smallest kid around. Right? I was always the skinniest guy, the shortest guy, or whatever the case. In 2016, I was like, dude, I'm done with this stuff. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out. And I'll be short, but I won't be as skinny as I was before. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like, all right, I'll do what I can, essentially. And going to the gym and putting in the work and then seeing the results, that was like my first taste that you could actually change. And you could actually become the victor of your own story. Back then, I was the victim. People would, you know, say certain things or whatever the case might be. But I'm like, dude, I'm sick and tired of the situation. Let me put in some work. It wasn't money. It wasn't, you know, capital. It was just me and my body in the gym. And I did that, and I started seeing results, and I started gaining confidence. I'm like, okay, cool. So discipline is good. And if I use discipline and I put in the work, I get results. Great. And then I use that same newfound knowledge to apply it into business, right? When I started the whole dropshipping, then it's like, look, if I stay disciplined with this thing, just like I did with the gym, I put in work, I learn every single day that I try, eventually I'll get results. And so for anyone that's in that situation where they want to make a change, right? They want 2024 to be different. They don't necessarily know how, right? They might not have the resource. That might help you. It sounds weird, but like, go to the gym and get in shape and just like learn internally that if you put in work, you get results. And I think that's a big thing with people. They don't have that belief. They don't think it's possible, even if you put in the work, because they've been programmed to believe that, you know, social media, whatever the case might be, it's all unfair, it's all unjust. No, it's not. If you put in the work, you will get results in a long enough time frame. And so I feel like a lot of people just need that self-belief. They need to be able to believe in themselves and understand that concept that if you put in the work, you'll get results. And so for anyone that doesn't necessarily have a big drive, like taking care of their parents or whatever the case, but they want more out of life, that, from my point of view, would be a easy way to get into that version of yourself. Just get your ass to the gym, put in some work, and then you'll build this internal belief that, one, you're capable of doing things that you didn't think were possible. Two, if you put in work, you get results, so the system isn't rigged. How about you? What would be your take on that?
I think at the end of the day, and this is once again cliche, but there's two things that pushes someone. It's fear or inspiration. Mm-hmm. And human behavior is all the same. Humans are very, It's funny. It's like copy and paste. Human behavior. It's easy to predict. And the FBI, they did a study, and they asked people who were robbed and like shot. Like what were you thinking like once you got shot? Like what was the first thing that came to mind? And most people said, and these were innocent people. Someone robbed them and they got shot. Most people said, how could they do that to me? How could someone be doing this to me? And then they asked criminals, and they asked, it was a self-defense situation where an innocent person had a gun, and they shot the criminal trying to rob them. And the FBI interviewed the criminals and said, what was the first thing that went through your mind when you got shot? And overwhelming, the response was, for the criminals, how could someone be doing this to me?
Interesting.
How could someone be doing this to me when they're the ones that robbed them?
Yeah.
So human behavior, humans are, we're all very, very similar in the way we think. Now, granted, you know, how you're raised, your environment, the things that you've told yourselves and your subconscious, all of that stuff will vary. But when we look at that study, we realize that whether or not you're in a bad situation, either because you're the bad guy or because you're the good guy, whatever, however you want to classify that, I think we can apply that to business. If you're not successful right now, and you're also looking at someone who is extremely successful, I think we can identify that there's really not much of a difference between the two. We all shed blood. It's the same color, right? We all need air and oxygen, water, etc. So identifying the difference between what did that person do versus what did I do. And normally it starts off with belief. Normally it starts off with the things that you tell yourselves. Because if you tell yourself the system is rigged, if you tell yourself I'm not going to be successful and I'm going to be poor the rest of my life, if you're in that environment, guess what? That's where you're going to end up in 5 years. You're going to be in the same exact situation. But if you tell yourself you deserve more, if you're in an environment where there's other successful people, guess what? In 5 years, you have a pretty good chance of being extremely successful and leveling up.
Yeah. I agree. And you know, you mentioning that brought me back to some inner work I had to do back in the day, back in like 2017 when I started. I decided, look, I'm going to make this online money. I'll figure it out. College isn't the way for me. My parents, you know, again, they love me, and our parents love us, right? And they want the best for us. But their point of view is biased, right? They've lived 40, 50. I mean, my parents are like 55 now, right? So they lived a long life. So there's a lot of belief that have been cemented in their brain, right? And not that I don't want to be like my parents, but my parents weren't business owners. I want to be a business owner, right? And so they were employees, and they believe in that. You know, they believe in that and all that stuff. And so there was a lot of stuff that they would say or they would do, or they would say it amongst themselves that I would listen to it that would conflict with what I believe was possible. And so during that time frame, you know, you talked about if you're in an environment that, you know, is to some extent like putting you down or not necessarily elevating your way of thinking and stuff, you'll be like them. I agree. Now, for a lot of kids, you know, 17, 18, they still live with their parents. So what are they going to do? Like, they can't move out. They can't necessarily not talk to their parents, right? And so how do you start learning, start thinking, start associating yourself with these higher level of thoughts when you're still in the environment you can't necessarily leave? And I think for me, the way that I did it is inside of my house, I isolated myself. Well, I would be in school for like the entire day. My school ended at like 4 p.m. And when I got home, I would just be in my room listening to either podcasts, YouTube, or just like headphones on, listening to some motivational stuff. Like I had to submerge myself in the whole making money, self-development world, for that to be so loud that whatever was happening around me wouldn't get inside of my head. And I think that looking back, I'm like, dude, good job. Like, thank you for doing that. Because I see a lot of people that were in the same situation as me back in the day. They're the same now.
You said something that's really interesting, right? And I think this goes back to if someone wants to make a change, especially in 2024 coming up, what can they do? Well, a good question to ask yourself, 10 years from now, I'm going to be happy with this decision that I'm about to make or not? Or am I going to regret it? I think for so many people our age, and it's really, really sad, they're not looking 5 years out, 6 years out, 8 years out, 10 years out. They don't even see a future.
Yeah.
They don't even see a future, and I think that's so, so sad.
Yep. I agree, man. I don't know. I don't know if it's programming, if there's someone behind all of this stuff, but dude, once you isolate yourself and you start consuming better content, and for whatever reason you go back to these environments where people are okay with watching TV and the news and stuff like that, it's a big contrast. Like I remember I left New Jersey to live in Miami in 2019. Right, I moved down there. I lived out there for 5 years. And then when I would come back home to Jersey, they watch the news and everybody's on their phones and stuff like that. I would listen and I would feel almost like sick. It's like, what is all this stuff that they're listening to? Like, why are you believing this then? Why are you saying this? Why are you watching this? Why are you not realizing what people are saying? And it's like when you're so into the norm, which is like what most of our people our age, are doing. They're on TikTok, they're on social media. You don't realize, but there's a lot of stuff that is being programmed into your brain. And for whatever reason, it's not necessarily good. It's to live in the now. It's to go with your feelings. It's to do this. It's say what you want, do what you feel. It's all this sort of stuff. It's nothing around plan ahead. Like, start working on yourself. Become better. There's none of that stuff out there.
Well, if it's really interesting because if you look at Karl Marx, who wrote the Communist Manifesto, and I highly recommend every capitalist to read that, and then read the book called The Capitalist Manifesto. Compare the two. But when you look at what they preach in the Communist Manifesto, it's really scary. It's really, really scary. And I'm not going to make this podcast political, right? I don't care what side of the aisle you lean on. But there is a difference between American principles and un-American principles. And I think when you look at society and what society has become, you see a lot of remnants of things that they talked about in the Communist Manifesto, right? Because at the end of the day, capitalism, I think this is a good place to kind of take this conversation, but capitalism, it's the worst system, but it's way better than all the other ones out there.
Interesting take.
Right? And capitalist was a system that is all about selfishness and greed, but the irony is, it's actually probably the most giving system when you implement it the right way. Because people get to level up. They get to grow. They get to become, they have the freedom to do all these amazing things. Communism, on the flip side, in theory, it should be the most giving system. It should be a system of compassion and care. When you actually look at its practice, it's normally a system of pain and suffering and restrictions of freedom. It's really interesting. And I don't know if there's this greater force or power or energy, whatever, trying to turn this into a communist country, socialism, whatever that may be. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, and I'm not well-versed enough to even talk about that. But with that being said, I think it's super important, and that's why we're doing this. I think it's super important for entrepreneurs like us to keep helping people level up. I think it's super important for us to keep growing and to produce content like this in order to make sure that the best system prevails. Because I genuinely believe the more people that can fight for capitalist principles, the more people that can learn how to create businesses and scale or be a part of a business and help them grow, where they're not looking at attacking billionaires and taxing them, but they're looking at how they can go and actually support billionaires. Because if a billionaire is worth $10 billion, that probably means they made a bunch of other people $90 billion. And that's good for everybody. It really, really is. You can be a part of it, or you're going to be crushed by the system.
I agree. And that's a cool thing. That's the one concept that I learned, very early on is you get to pick. There are two sides, 110%. There's the victors and the victims. There's the people that grow. There's the people that stay stuck. There's two sides, very clear. The cool thing is you get to pick. Nobody else does. And I think that's a belief that if you if someone listening to this stuff right now or watching this content, if you don't possess that belief, if you don't have that internally, find a way to like study, look, test it. Find a way to internalize that belief, because that really dictates what you do. If you believe you lost already, right? It's this whole quote from Henry Ford, whether you believe you're right or wrong, you're right. If you don't have the ability to believe that you could win, you will never win. And so it's important for you to understand you get to pick. You could be a winner. You could be at the top. You don't have to be like everybody else. You don't have to, $15 an hour for 40 years. Like that doesn't have to be the end. And for whatever reason, there is this narrative that, someone else is deciding that for you. And they pin it against billionaires and trying to make more money out of people and exploiting people and blah, blah, blah. And they're trying to make you their enemy. And it's like, now, you get to pick. Not the news, not some billionaire, not your neighbor, not your upbringing. You could pick. And if you don't truly believe that, then I encourage dude, find a way to. Because that's the start of everything. You started your business because you read that book and you believed it was possible. And now we are where we are. And it started from that belief that if we put in the work, if we learn, if we have the right tools and in a long enough time frame, we can win. But I've talked to people lately now that I've been traveling. I don't know if you knew this, but this whole year I've been traveling. I went to like 8 different countries, right? I stayed in a country for like a month or two, and then I go somewhere else. And I've met so many people.
Why'd you do that?
I feel like I got tired of the whole Miami living, bro. Like, I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't party per se. Like, I don't go to clubs and stuff like that. And I feel like that was a lot of what the city offered. And I lived out there for 5 years, and I'm like, I don't know. I want something different. And so I sold everything I owned, and I moved. I just been traveling, and this experience has been crazy, because I've seen a lot of people that, I was in Colombia for three months, and I've met people there that truly believed they didn't have a capability of change, that their destiny was like doomed. I'm like, dude, that's such a poisonous belief.
It's sad.
Very.
And I think, and I don't know if you could tell, I'm a huge patriot, right? And I'm a big history nerd too. And there's this one speech where President Kennedy, right, it's actually right before he got assassinated, and he was talking about going to the moon. And he said, "We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard." And there's another part of that speech. I think a lot of people right now, they're looking for the easy way out. They're looking for that instant gratification. And I think social media has a lot to play with that. I think just the society and the way that the society is going in the environment, what's becoming the societal norm is totally different than what it was 40 years ago. I think that has a lot to do with it. But I think for anyone listening, right? I think for anyone listening that kind of realizes this, right? Or they think that this is slightly a possibility, like what we're saying is slightly true, right? I think what they can do, and if someone really does believe in this and they want to figure out how to level up, how to make 2024 their year, I think you have to do this thing that President Kennedy said, and I'll try to paraphrase this. So Frank O'Connor, I believe, is the person who wrote this, and he's an Irish poet. And it's a story about when he and his friends were walking along in Ireland. They would come across this orchard, and there was a tall wall. It was really high, really tall, really thick. It was hard to get over. And normally, they would go the easy path. They'd just go the long, well, I wouldn't even say the easy path because it was longer. This longer road to get around the barrier, to get around the wall. And one day, he and his friends, they threw their hats over the wall that their mums made for them, right? They're from Ireland, so they'd say mums, that their mums made for them. They throw their hats over the wall. And now, they couldn't come home without those hats. And because they threw their hats over the wall, they were forced to follow suit. They were forced to find a way to climb over the wall. And you know what? When they put themselves in that situation, where they forced themselves to come up with a solution, and they, instead of saying, I can't do it, they asked themselves, how can I do this? They figured out a way to do it. So for anyone listening, especially for someone who wants to make 2024 their year, they need to just decide to throw their hats over the wall, force themselves into that situation.
I agree, dude. It's a powerful concept, and I think people like you and I and other of our peers, we've internalized that because it's just the name of the game, right? A lot of times, it's 5 days before the end of the month, you haven't hit your sales target, but you made that goal and you just find a way, right? Because again, we just reinforce this belief that if I put myself in a situation where the only option is to win, if the only option is through, we find a way. And now for us, it's like we utilize it as a tool. But for a lot of people, that takes a lot of balls. That takes a lot of freaking balls. And so for someone that, let's say in 2024, they want to start a business, for example, but that means that they're going to have to use their savings and put money here and put money there. A lot of people get paralyzed because that's huge. They haven't exercised the muscle of believing that they can win despite their fears. And a concept that has helped me a lot is it's the smaller wins. And I think I got this from what's his name? Ed Milet. The One Decision Away. He talks about, in order for you to be confident, you have to gain belief in yourself. And how you gain belief in yourself is you do that by the little things. So let's say, and this is a concept that some people are against. I tried it and it works for me, but let's say you do want to at some point be able to make that decision of, starting a business or whatever the case might be. Start with the little things. For example, it's going to sound silly, but if one of your resolutions for 2024 was get in the gym, you say you were going to work out 3 to 5 times a week. Before you work out, before you go to the gym, if there's something that you have to do small, like, make my bed or whatever, make the bed. And then when it comes time to go to the gym, because you've already kept a promise for yourself, it builds momentum and it's easier to keep going down that route. And so eventually you get to the point where you're faced with this huge wall and you have to climb it, right? Which is starting a business, spending the money, because you've already stuck with your word. Because we already built that self-belief that, hey, I can't follow through with the commitments I've made. It becomes easier to make something like that. And so if you're right now, there's a lot of things in your life that are not straight, but you want to start a business, maybe, perhaps, I'm not saying this is the way to do it. This is the way that worked for me. Perhaps you should start with the smaller things. Find a way to fix them. Your relationship with your dad, or going to the gym, being more organized, not having your room a mess. So start with these little things. That builds momentum. And it builds proof to yourself that you can change. That you can achieve things greater than what you've been used to. And once you could prove to yourself, I actually do these things, I actually could do this, then it's easier. And I feel like for me, that's one of the, and it's interesting how life works, right? Because you don't necessarily work out. Do you you go to the gym all the time and stuff like that, or is that a thing?
A few times a week, yeah.
Cool. Like for me, I've been a big advocate to working out because it's helped me tremendously in business. And it's like the moments where I didn't want to go to the gym because I had a headache or because it was snowing back in, when I lived out here and stuff, and I did, that created like a little thing in my brain that like, dude, you actually can do these hard things. And that I've used that proof when it comes to making big, risky business decisions and stuff like that. And so, yeah, for, just to circle back on that point, for anyone that wants to change in 2024, perhaps start with these little things. Build this self-belief that you can change. And then when it comes time to bringing that wall, to going over that wall, then perhaps it'll be easier. 100%. Cool conversation so far, man. I have one question for you. Jared Curry, 23 years old. 22 years old. What does a day in your life regularly look like? What are you doing? What are you thinking? What kind of information are you consuming? What does that look like?
It's a great question. I think for anyone listening, I think you have to be really careful with what you actually apply from what I'm about to say. Because I'm a big believer in the things that someone who's at 7 or 8 figures is doing is going to be totally different than the things that you need to do if you're at 6 figures. Yep. I think there's a lot of people out there, they listen to Warren Buffett and Alex Hormozi, and they hear what their days in the life look like. But at the end of the day, you have to earn the right to get there. Mm-hmm. You have to earn the right to be successful. It is not a given. Mm-hmm. I know everyone has been conditioned that they're entitled to something nowadays. Mm-hmm. There's no entitlement with success. There's no entitlement with business. You must earn the right. Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, I think, well, for me right now, and it goes back to what you just said about goals and accomplishing them and starting off with the small things. One small thing you could do is write down your goals. So every day, well, not every day, I try to be as consistent as possible with this stuff. You're 42% more likely to achieve your goals when you write them down. Literally 42%. So I start off my day, I write down my goals, and I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. And they're very simple. Normally it's water, family, God, food, roof over my head, clothes, etc., things like that. Right? And I ground myself a little bit about the most important things in life. So I start off with that. Then at the end of the day, the most important thing with most businesses is sales. Mm-hmm. So to this day, I have a sales manager for our company. To this day, I oftentimes will hop on the sales huddles. I oftentimes will talk to our setters. And I will make sure we're on track to hit KPIs. We're on track to hit projections. And we're doing everything we can to squeeze the juice out of every lead. We're spending about $40,000 to $50,000 a month on Facebook ads right now for our agency. Our closers have to be on point. And I think it's important for them to see me still involved in that part of the company. So I'm talking to my sales team. Depending on the morning, I'll read. And then for a big chunk of the day, I am blessed to have the freedom to decide what my day looks like. I'm blessed to have the freedom to decide not to do anything. If I want to go fly a plane, if I want to go, just hang out with friends, or if I want to work. And that's a day in my life right now.
Nice. Let's use the...
It's not as structured as that. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm fasting. I'm going to the gym. But no, I honestly did that for a period of time, and when I was doing that stuff, and I think it works for some people, but when I was doing that stuff, I was probably growing the least. Because I was spending so much time on routines, and I wasn't spending my time on the things that really, really mattered in my business.
So, most of the people that are going to listen to this are going to be on that 0 to 6 figure journey, right? And so if you could think back to what Jared on the climb up to 6 figure was doing, what did that look like?
Treat your body like a temple, right? In the Bible, it says to treat your body like a temple. And that's not just physically, it's mentally. And my good friend Jose Sanchez has this thing called mental protein, right? What's the mental protein that you can get for your brain? At that level, 0 to 6 figures, I need mental protein. I need to listen to podcasts like this. I need to indoctrinate myself with as much information as possible, as much content, as much educational stuff as I can. Courses, SMA, whatever I'm doing, if it's regarding SMMA, I'm going to focus all my time on just learning SMA. If it's ecom, I'm going to devote all my time to ecom. But I'm going to do that outside of money-making activities. And if you're just getting started off, the two most important things that you can do is get your mind right with mental protein and sales. It's simple. SACA, set and close appointments. So I need to set a lot of appointments. So if I was just starting off at 0 to 6 figures, early mornings, mindset, affirmations, watching videos, all of that good stuff. And as soon as it's money-making activity time, I'm cold calling because I'm not going to have any money to run up ads or do any of that stuff. So I'm going to cold call all day. And at night, I'm going back into my mental protein. If you do that, 0 to 6 figures may take you 2 weeks, may take you 2 months, or it could be like me, it took me a year. But if you do that, you will eventually succeed.
That's awesome. Great advice, man. I oftentimes, I don't know if you do this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I've been journaling for a while now, and I know there's times in everyone's journey where we're up, we're down, and in the times that I'm down, I like to think back to what was Angel on the climb to XYZ thinking/doing, because obviously success and sales is a lagging indicator, right? Is you get the results now, but it's not necessarily because of what you did now. It's for what you've been doing, right? And so whenever I'm on the valley of things are not necessarily going as well, I like to look back at what was I thinking before the climb up, because whatever I was doing then is what I, to some extent, could do now, right? Because I lost the mojo or whatever somehow, some way. And so it's been super insightful to go back to my journals and see shit, this is what this guy was thinking. This is what he was consuming. This was what was on his mind, or whatever the case. Have you ever done something like that? Do you do that at all? Do you journal?
Yeah.
You go back?
I do. Once in a while, right? Once in a while, I'll write down where I'm at in life, and I like to just look back at that. Typically around this time of year, actually, and just share what's going on. Yeah. It's really motivating, right?
Truly.
Puts things into perspective, and it also makes you realize how far you've come. So for sure.
Nice. One last question here. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that one of your big goals for 2024 was to re-strength your connection with God. Can you talk about a little bit how you, if at all, combine business and your faith?
I believe that the business that I'm in now is a stepping stone. I believe that it's a stepping stone into something that God wants me to do, explore. And I think everything you do is for his kingdom, right? And whether that be lifting one of my team members out of poverty, helping them change their life the way they think, inspiring someone else to do it, right? Helping my business partner through something. But ultimately, I think it's giving me the skill sets, the capital, and the leverage I need to go out there and do things that he really wants me to do. I don't know what that is yet. I have a good idea. And I think with that, the reason why I'm building the agency, the reason why I'm doing all this stuff, is because I know there's a bigger purpose and a bigger reason. And I know that I'm going to need to leverage the reputation, the skill sets, the capital, the experience, all of that in order to do what he really wants me to do. Ask me that in a year and we'll see how my answer changes.
Right. Nice. So essentially to put this into my own understanding, your connection with God and businesses, you understand that the task you're doing at the moment, the business you're building right now, is to somehow, some way continue his plan in your life. So you see it as an extension of his plan, not necessarily two separate things. 100%. Good. Yeah, that is a thought that I wouldn't say that I've wrestled with, but I grew up in a Christian family, right? My parents, I always went to church. I used to be the drummer at my church and stuff like that. And so then you look at business and you look at, to some extent, role models or people that are winning at life, and the majority of them don't necessarily live a God-fearing life. So then you start wondering, can I have both? Can I have this amazing life with success and all this stuff and also be God-fearing? And I think that from my point of view, there's just not a lot of examples of people doing out that stuff like that. And I think it's important for people like you, that have achieved success and that also believe in God to talk about it, because there's people like me looking for role models. Like, how can you do both? And so, you mentioned 2024 content was a second priority. First priority was God. I would love to see more of that.
I think, and Matt's really good at talking about this stuff, but
cool guy.
I think he made a video about this. Actually, it's hard for them to believe in that, because once you start achieving so much success, and this is what I struggle with this year, you forget what got you there. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of good examples. I think people aren't as vocal about it. I think it's becoming more vocalized, for sure. But I think a lot of people aren't vocal about it.
Yeah, interesting. Segue, how are we on time? We're good? Cool. Couple quick questions here, 22, building businesses. This is the thing that, for whatever reason, dude, I get asked a lot in my DMs. Girlfriend situation. What are you? You're 22. Obviously, you're very well off. What are you doing in that area of your life? Is that even a?
Oh, I pray my parents or family don't watch this. Oh man,
I had to ask.
I've never had to talk about this one on a podcast, but it's actually a really interesting subject.
Yeah,
I think behind every successful man is a woman that lifted them up through the good and the bad, motivated, inspired, and made them better. And for me, I am in a relationship, and I think once again, once you get to the things you do at 7 and 8 figures are not the things you do at 6 to 7 or 0 to 6. And I think it becomes extremely difficult to focus when you're building. And you have to find someone who understands what's happening, understands what you're building and why you're building. So for me in my relationship, it's conducive to my lifestyle. She realizes that the business right now, it's the main priority. Because without the business, we can't achieve our long-term goal. And you have to have that alignment on that goal. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're so focused, especially these digital entrepreneurs of today. I was hanging out with one that I coach and mentor. He's 18. I was just with him. And he just can't talk to girls or just people and socialize. It's hard. We're behind the computer screen making all this money, and we're always looking at that podcast like this, but we can't actually go out there and build relationships. And I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous because as you keep developing that normal lifestyle of not being able to talk to people, not being able to talk to girls, or never being in a relationship, I think it's going to actually be a detriment to you in the long term. So I don't know if that answered your question.
So for someone listening, how can they do both? Right? You talked about that 18-year-old kid making money on the computer. He figured that part out, but then he's lacking on the social skills and being able to talk to girls. So you've been through that path. How did you figure it out?
How did I learn business? I bought a coaching program. How do I learn about social skills and social interactions? I hired a coach.
Interesting.
Coach that has been on TV for talking, building relationships and talking to girls, but also just how to socialize and be in a social setting. So I think in all aspects of your life, if you struggle, simple answer is to hire a coach.
See? It goes back to the thing we talked about. People at, you know, higher levels in life, they believe in coaching. They understand that mentorship is probably one of the fastest route for you to get that, you know, information / you know, frameworks, mindset shift, or whatever it is you're lacking to get to an end goal. So you've actually, I'm going to say this, you've actually hired a coach to help you be more social and gain the skills that insane. Insane.
A lot of people don't listen to like, what? That's so weird.
Right. But it helped, right? You're in a relationship now. Yep. It's insane. You could literally get a coach for just about anything. And it's probably one of the fastest routes as opposed to you doing trial and error. Cool. Okay.
And also, man, if you want to level up in your life, you have to have that person on your side that is also of high caliber. If you want that 10 out of 10, that beautiful girl who can also support you, you have to become that type of man. Just because you make a lot of money, just because you're good at business, does not give you the right, once again, entitlement, doesn't give you the right to deserve that. You have to earn that. Best way to do that is by learning from the person who's already achieved it.
Boom. Cool. I think we could close out there unless you have any other questions.
That's all I got, man. I guess first off, thank you so much for inviting me on. It was great conversation. It's really, really cool. I guess the last thing for you is, what would you say to that person who's listening and they're trying to level up, not just in business, but in all aspects of their lives? What would be your piece of advice before we let go?
I'm a very analytical person, and I like step-by-steps. I think the first thing that you need to realize is get clear on what you want or what you don't want out of 2024. There has to be a level of clarity. You can't hit a target you can't see, right? You can't go to a destination you don't even have, right? And so you have to decide, if you don't necessarily want the Lamborghini or whatever the case, then decide what you don't want out of 2024, and make that the target. Hey, I don't want to end here. I don't want to only have $400 in my bank account, or whatever the case might be. Figure out what it is that you don't want. And once you have that, I know a lot of people want to skip this part, but you have to do the inner work. You have to. Thoughts control your actions. Your actions control your habits, or they create your habits. And habits essentially dictate where you end up. Right? What you do every day, that's essentially what you create, right? What you cultivate. And so if that is true, if someone can understand that, you know, thought process there, then your actions dictate your result. I mean, your thoughts dictate your results. And if you don't change the way you think, your results will never match up to your desires and whatever it is you want in life. And so second thing here is you have to do the inner work. And that's going to be in the form of, like you mentioned, you know, submerge yourself in self-development. Whatever it is you want to do. You want to be a content creator, you want to be a YouTuber, dude, just look at that. Just consume that. Stop Netflix. Stop, you know, playing video games. Whatever it is you're doing right now in this part of your life, the next 6 months, right? We're going into 2024. Between now and summertime, like, this is the only thing you're focusing on. Is consuming information that's going to help you, you know, get results in that area. And then lastly, it's like, for me, I'm a big believer in, like, physical health. Like, don't be a dork. Dude, like, work out. Even if it's in your room, push-ups, whatever it is, you get your body moving. It's I mean, it's been proven, right? It releases endorphins, dopamine. There's all these good things about it. And the great thing is that if you're having a shitty day, which we all will, and we all have, but you worked out and you look at yourself in the mirror and you see the pump, like, you'll feel good, bro. Yeah. You'll live to tell another day. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up, is something bad happens, but then they look at another area of their life and then something bad is happening there. Like, there's so many negative things going on around them, when in reality you could tackle this little thing so that if the big business, if you're still not making the money, at least you have a lot of other stuff to be proud about. Yeah. And you need in the come up. You need the small wins when you're pushing, you know, towards a big goal like quitting your job and working full-time remotely or whatever the case might be. You need the smaller things. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would say. You know, first thing, get clear on what you want or what you don't want. Second thing, submerge yourself in that space. And then third thing, as easy as it sounds, get your ass to the gym.
There you go.
Get moving. That's it.
There you go, man. Dude.
Appreciate you, Jared. Thank you so much, man, for having me here. It's great having you as a friend, as a mentor.
Likewise.
You know, I watched the How to Scale an Agency to 7 Figures in a month. A great video.
Thank you, man.
So yeah, I appreciate your friendship. Appreciate, you know, you putting out content. I'm excited to see what Jared 2025 is gonna look like right after he achieves everything he's doing in 2024. Praying for your success, bro. Cheering for you.
Thank you, man. Likewise.
I'll see you guys in the next one, and make sure you guys select one of these videos that the YouTube algorithm just hand selected for you. See you guys.